On today's show, the Warriors even the series against the Lakers behind a big Klay Thompson performance. Did they crack the Lakers' defense? The Bucks fire Mike Budenholzer. Why this next decision could be the biggest decision the Bucks have made in half a decade. Plus, we'll look at who has the edge in Sixers-Celtics and Suns-Nuggets. All of that and more coming up next.
You are Locked On NBA, your daily NBA podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to Locked On NBA. I'm Wes Goldberg here with Adam Mares. However you might be listening on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. We're going to talk about who the Bucks could hire to replace Mike Budenholzer and look ahead to tonight's playoff games. But let's start with tonight's Warriors-Lakers game. Recording this right after Klay Thompson made 8 3-pointers and the Warriors cruised to a blowout win over the Lakers to even the series. I do want to give credit to the Warriors, but the Lakers played that game like they were content getting the split in San Francisco. We have to start with Anthony Davis, a really bad Anthony Davis game after he dominated game one. The national story was that if he could just keep playing like this, that the Lakers would have the edge over the Warriors. And then he comes out and lays an egg. 11 points on 11 shots. This was a blowout, garbage time. Clear the benches in most of the fourth quarter. I think we have to start with Anthony Davis. Adam, what did you make of AD tonight?
He was terrible. What did I make of him? He was horrible. And this is the story of Anthony Davis in his career outside of the bubble, is that he seems to be, prime Akeem Olajuwon one night, and then, the opposite of that the next. And that's what it was tonight. I do think the Warriors did some things that we'll get to here in a second that made life difficult on him. But the big difference, the Warriors made shots in game one. They didn't really get into the paint the way that they did tonight. I thought Steph Curry lived in the paint. I thought he got around the first line of defense a lot tonight, and I thought he wasn't deterred. Now, he was more of a floor setter or a table setter tonight while Klay Thompson had it going. But I just felt like in game one, the Warriors were afraid to be in the paint and inside the three-point line. Tonight, I felt like they were there at will, getting where they want and getting exactly the type of shots they want. The defense could not have been more night and day for the Lakers as a whole, but Anthony Davis in particular.
I'm with you. Even after that game one, when he had the 30 points, my big takeaway is what he was doing defensively. He was just so disruptive to everything the Warriors wanted to do. He just turned them into flatly a jump shooting team. Nothing at the basket. The Warriors couldn't get to the free throw line, and Anthony Davis deserves so much credit for that. And I was having a conversation. I was on a Warriors podcast, and they were like, do you think Anthony Davis can keep that going? And I was like, offensively, no, because exactly what you just said, Adam. Like, it's just not really what he does, right? Like, not anymore. Not since being outside the bubble. But defensively, like, he could do that, I think, basically every game. It just feels like in this game tonight on Thursday night, like, I don't know. It just like, I go back to this. Like, were they just like cool with getting that first game and then just be like, all right, we stole home court advantage. We kind of did the assignment and let's go back to LA. I don't know. I can't really figure out what the Lakers, because their defense overall was so good in that game. Not just Anthony Davis, but like Jared Vanderbilt face guarding Steph Curry, chasing him all over the floor. Dennis Schroeder kind of doing the same thing in his minutes. Guys just flying around. And then in this game, it just felt like it was like a shoot around walkthrough for them. And they, I don't mean to take away too much from the Warriors, but I really didn't get much interference from the Lakers at all in this one.
Well, I got to credit Steve Kerr and the Warriors for two important adjustments. Number one, the most insane adjustment of the playoffs to date, starting JaMychal Green. Yes, JaMychal Green started over Kevon Looney. And if you think about it, it's a crazy move, except Jared Vanderbilt is such a unique player for the Lakers. He's not a threat on offense. He's a great defender, but by putting J-Mike out there, you're essentially giving, he's like a spacing 5 or really spacing 4, but spacing 5 in this instance. So you're drawing one person out on the perimeter because he's going to score. And by the way, he had 15 points tonight. What was it? 15 points in 13 minutes, goes 3 of 6 from the 3-point line. He worked perfectly as a floor spacer, but then your fear is, okay, well, JaMychal Green's a little long in the tooth. He's not the most mobile guy, but he's guarding Jared Vanderbilt, who's just not a threat. So I thought it worked perfect. It was the perfect sort of Jared Vanderbilt was the first perfect player for the Warriors to be able to do this. And then the second thing they did was they extended the screens they were setting well beyond the arc. There, some pieces all the way out at the logo. And I think what they were trying to do was expand the court. You give an extra shooter on the court, in JaMychal Green. So now the corners are expanded. And then you set the screens a little bit higher. So now the top of the key is expanded. And what you did was you forced the Lakers to cover more space. And you basically made the paint a runway for them to kind of get dribble penetration. Steph Curry, I thought his handle tonight was on point. He was getting into the paint, but he was running downhill. And yes, I think there was some Lakers fatigue, but part of that fatigue was created by the Warriors by making this a larger ground to cover.
Yeah, a lot of people were wondering whether or not the Lakers could even play that relentless style of defense that they were playing in game one when you're playing LeBron and AD 40-plus minutes. Could they do that for a 7-game series? And the answer is obviously maybe they couldn't do it for 2 games, let alone 7 games. Like, who knows? It didn't look like they could do it again tonight. I'm with you. I think a big adjustment, not just the level of the screen, just the amount of it, right? One way to get that face guarding away from Steph Curry and kind of make it easier on Steph is just give him the ball. Stop with all like that cutesy, just like I'm coming off the split cuts and all that kind of. Just give him the ball, let him run pick and roll with Draymond Green. You know what I mean? And they did that a lot more. Kevin O'Connor from The Ringer had like the synergy tweet. He had the stats basically. They ran it more. Bottom line, a lot more. And so I thought that was a great move. The JaMychal Green thing was interesting. Kevon Looney reportedly got sick, like undisclosed sickness right before the game. I think maybe they used that as a little bit of an excuse, because the other thing in that first game was that they were just playing off of Draymond and Kevon Looney. And I think we've seen Steve Kerr do that even in the last series, benching Draymond Green in favor of Kevon Looney, because I think they're figuring out like it's really hard to score points, even with Steph and Klay, when you have 2 non-shooters out there. Although the Lakers basically treated JaMychal Green like he was a non-shooter. Like, those shots were wide open. They were just basically letting him have them. Where in game one, I was telling like how they took away stuff at the rim, and you got to take something away from the Warriors. You got to do something. And in this one, they gave everything. Like, everybody had everything for the Warriors. Even Draymond Green was getting wide open layups. Like, I don't really know what the game plan was for the Lakers, because they didn't take anything away. Nothing.
Well, I got to say, I think all coaches go between games and they start to make predictions for what the other team's going to do. And usually the moves are obvious. I think this was a move that was pretty outside the box. I mean, look, the Warriors aren't as deep as they have been in years past, where you could throw an Otto Porter out there or somebody that was a little bit more, somebody that you had seen in those moments before. JaMychal Green being elevated to the starting role and doing that, I would imagine probably caught Darvin Ham and the Lakers a little bit off guard. And that's
I wonder
why
if they'll do it again, because we saw like Draymond gets suspended. They have to start Kevon Looney and they go small with Jordan Poole. And then they just kept kind of rolling with it until game 7 of that King series. Like, I wouldn't be surprised if they just
I think they are going to try. I wouldn't be surprised either if they try to roll with it, but I do think the Lakers can now prepare for it a little bit better. But the result tonight was that the Warriors had 38 assists, which is an absurd number for a playoff game against a good defense. Steph Curry, 30 minutes tonight and just 12 shots, 7 of 12. Again, this is one of the things about the Warriors and why they are a championship team and have been together for a decade now. Their ability to adjust on the fly to, okay, here's the new texture of the game. Steph Curry goes into point guard mode. I'm going to distribute. I'm going to let everybody else shoot. And if you look at the breakdown in scoring, everybody was basically taking the same amount of shots, 10, 9, 8, 12, 18, 6, 9, 6, 9. Like the ball was distributed evenly for everybody. And this brings me to the second point. So I think it was a great game plan by the Warriors, who the Lakers didn't seem to be able to figure out. They really collapsed at the end of the second quarter. And then, of course, the third was just blowout time. But you mentioned, like, can these guys do this for 7 times? This was my biggest skepticism about the Lakers the entire playoffs. They need to play every other day through this series. And should they win, immediately travel to Denver at altitude and then play another series. And the fact that they hit the wall as much as they did tonight, I think is surprising. And I think the Lakers stretching them out and trying to make the court big is smart, because it makes the games harder. It's akin to saying, hey, we're going to get up and down the court more. It's like, no, we're going to make the move left to right more. And they wore out already. And I'll say this, LeBron James, I don't think he has it in him to be an offensive and defensive player. I thought he tried to be an offensive player tonight, a little more aggressive, a lot less aggressive on the defensive end. And he can't do that. Tonight, he was a minus 27 in his minutes, and it felt worse.
Offensively, he 23 points on 18 shots. He made 3 of 8 on 3-point range, but like kind of settled for those 3-pointers. I don't like when LeBron takes those threes, man. Like I get taking them in early and just kind of seeing if you got it tonight. Like, I get it, but he settles for a lot of those these days. And then defensively, like, he just let 2 guys, like, he gave up. One was to Draymond and one was to somebody else, just wide open layups. Just like let them go. Maybe I
Right.
think it was a Jordan Poole maybe early in the game, and just didn't try. I keep going back to this point, but I think there's something to it. I think the Lakers, having won the first game in this series, were very content to just kind of go back to LA with the split series, and they played like it. There was just zero intensity from any of their guys, other than Rui Hachimura, who had like the game of his life again. But I don't know. I think I hear you on the fatigue factor. It's definitely something real. LeBron has to pick his spots. This is not the same version of LeBron, and they just need way more from Anthony Davis because he's the 30-year-old. He's the guy.
I think he has to pick his spots too, though, Wes. He's the oldest 30-year-old I've ever seen in my life.
That's true, and that's the big question, isn't it? And does he have? The thing is, does he need to do it for 7 games, or just does he have to just do it for 4 games? You know what I mean?
It did feel, though, to your point, this did feel like a night that doesn't count towards the fatigue factor. Like they kind of took a half night off.
Yeah, I mean, LeBron played 28 minutes. Anthony Davis played 33 minutes. It's still kind of a lot of minutes, but it's not 44 minutes. I still don't know who I really like in this series. I picked Warriors in 7 going into it because I had home court, and I didn't even really feel that good about it. I have no idea. I think you can come away if you pick the Warriors after these 2 games, feeling good about your Warriors pick. I think if you still pick the Lakers going into this, coming out 1-1, you feel pretty good considering that they stole home court. Like I don't know that my opinions changed on these teams all that much after these 2 games.
Mine does a little bit. Here's the thing. I think that both teams are solvable. Like the playoffs are a lot about, can a team solve you? Meaning find something that you can't stop or stop you in a way that you can't solve. And I think both of these teams are solvable. And the Warriors in years past have not been. That's been one of the things about them is it's like, man, there's nothing you can do to stop their best punch, let alone all their counters. I think both teams are solvable, but I think the Lakers are significantly more solvable. Now they're going to adjust to this. I do feel like this was a one-time sneak attack move from the Warriors in some ways. But at the same time, a lot of their players look great when they're able. Jared Vanderbilt, when he's able to do the things he wants to do, he looks great. When you force him to do things he doesn't like to do, he looks terrible. And I just think the Warriors are going to find more ways to make the Lakers' role players look bad than the other way around.
If you're the Warriors, I think your message is do that again, guys. That's the game plan. Rinse and repeat. Keep doing it. And if you're Lakers, I think your message is make sure that's the worst game of the series for us, right? And it can only do better than that. All right, we're gonna move it along here. The Bucks are making a coaching change. Who is the most likely candidate to replace Mike Budenholzer? We'll get to that next. But first, today's episode of Locked On NBA is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know that the part's going to fit or get your money back. Because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. Get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. The Bucks on Thursday fired Mike Budenholzer. Not very surprising if you've been following that situation after the Bucks lost to the Heat in the first round. A lot of controversial decisions, non-decisions, etc. I do think it's a fair question to ask if he deserved to be fired, considering that he also just won a championship in 2021. But we also know that coaches get fired all the time without necessarily deserving to get fired. But I do think after that first round, and we could call it a failure if we want, it felt like something inevitable, right? It felt like something had to change. What did you think about the decision to fire Budenholzer?
Well, I'd heard rumblings all the way back in November about Giannis being over Bud. I think like a relationship that maybe had come to the end or just ready to move on from Coach Bud. And there were various reasons for it. So to me, this was a thing that I kind of saw coming, and the Bucks got off to such a good start without Middleton and played so well that I thought, okay, maybe nothing's going to happen here, but we'll see how it goes. When they lost in the first round, to me, it felt like it was a lock to happen. It felt like it was going to happen. And I just think, again, take this with a grain of salt, but I had just heard these rumblings at the start of the season. So I don't know that this is just a matter of losing, as the 1 seed and losing in the first round. But if you were to say if that is a good enough reason on its own merit, I think absolutely it is.
There's like two things that basically sealed the deal for Budenholzer here. Number one, the not taking the timeouts at the end of Game 5. That was a bad coaching mistake. He admitted it after the game that he should have called the timeouts, and then the way that it just got spun. Because the easiest thing that media and fans could do is like, you should have taken a timeout, or you should have not taken a timeout. Like, it's easy.
Hold on. Let me take a timeout. Did they lose in Game 7 in overtime of Game 7? Is that how it happened?
They lost in 5 games to the
They lost in 5 games. I don't want to hear that it was a timeout that cost them this. Now, the timeout might be indicative of a broader issue or game management that has been a critique of his.
It was because when you get fired at a company, when they're trying to fire you, they need something in your file that they could look at, right? And that was like the thing in the file for the Bucks ownership group. It was like the timeout thing. I'm with you. Like, you don't get fired over not calling a timeout. It's a lot of stuff.
They lost in 5.
And they lost in 5. The real thing that sealed the deal, and it goes back to what you were talking about, Giannis maybe being over Mike Budenholzer, is when he was asked, hey, did you want to get on to defend Jimmy Butler? Did you want to do that? And he goes, out of respect, the coach has to make that adjustment. And that was basically being like, that's his fault. Like that in between the lines. It's so like he could say that that's not what he meant, but
lines, man.
It was, it's blatantly, that's on the coach, not on me. You're Giannis, man. If you wanted to go get Jimmy Butler, you could have gone and defended Jimmy Butler. You're a star player. Superstar players make decisions on the court and override the coach all the time. And I'm sure Giannis has done it in the past too. That was blatantly, that was on Budenholzer. And that was it. Like, if you're a star player, and this team is so, like, they're in the luxury tax, they're so expensive, they're so limited in what it is that they can do. Brook Lopez and Middleton are already free agents. Like, there's no wholesale changes that you can make for a team that did have the best record in the NBA, but lost to the A seed in 5 games. The easiest change is just to change the coach. And I do think that it was deserved by Mike Budenholzer, because he's also, like, he won a championship, but he was also a Kevin Durant shoe size away from maybe losing in that. And then there was already rumblings before that, right, that he could get fired. So it just felt like this was a long time coming. But let's spin forward. Who do you think replaces him?
Well, hold on. I just want to say this one last thing about it. I think Coach Bud is a great coach. I think he is an innovator and has he's one of the coaches, and it's a short list, that other coaches copy and influences the league in terms of, some of the different decisions he's made along the way. He's moved the game forward, I think. Coaching in the NBA, to me, it's not just about, are you a good coach? It's, are you a good fit with your stars? And then it's not just, are you a good fit with your stars, but how does that evolve over time? And I think there was probably a point in time when Bud, Giannis, a good match.
In terms of the relationship too. Yeah.
But there is something, I mean, Larry Bird, I think he quit after 3 years and was asked why. He said, no coach can keep a locker room for more than 3 years. Like, eventually it just gets tired, gets annoying, over time. I heard a story that Ty Lue, maybe you were the one that told me this, I can't remember, but Ty Lue used to never coach the defense during the regular season, because if I coach all year, they're going to get annoyed of my voice, like of me yelling, get over, put your hands up, whatever it is. They're going to get tired of it. So everybody runs everything. I think coaches almost always run their course at some time. It's just, what's the expiration date? And I think this is more of an example of that. Not that Bud is bad, not that he's tragically flawed, not that Giannis is a coach killer of the Bucks or any of this. I just think it's like, hey, they were together for a long time. They reached the top success. They won a championship. Probably time for a new voice.
Well, who is that new voice? The on odds favorite is Charles Lee, who's an internal candidate. He's their associate head coach, took over for Darvin Ham and as sort of the lead assistant on that bench, and is already getting interest from teams like the Pistons and stuff like that. So he's a guy who's interviewed for head coaching jobs before. It's to call him a dark horse is not fair. Like, he's a legit assistant coach who is going to be, it looks like, a head coach at some point, whether it's from Milwaukee or another team. And maybe that's a reason why you make this decision now, because it does feel like kind of early to fire Mike Budenholzer. I mean, I guess if you already decided that you're going to do it, just do it. But also, if Charles Lee is interviewing for other jobs, maybe you want to create that vacancy. And if it's Charles Lee that you want, then you go ahead and get your guy. And then the other option that's out there is Nick Nurse, who makes a lot of sense. Won a championship, has experience. If we're playing matchmaker from the coaching perspective, if the Bucks offered Nick Nurse this job, he has to jump at it, right? First, you have Giannis, you have a championship roster. It's turnkey, walk in, we're competing for championships right away. And Giannis is kind of like the best version of everything he was trying to do in Toronto in terms of like ball handling and length and defense and all that stuff. Like it feels like Giannis is like a Nick Nurse wet dream, right? So,
well, that's what, you know what's funny though about Nick Nurse? What's the difference between Nick Nurse and Mike Budenholzer? They both won championships. Yeah. They both their teams got tired of them over time after the championship. They both have been innovators. I mean, to me, they almost.
Yeah, but Mike Budenholzer cringes when he drinks Dasani, and Nick Nurse plays the guitar, man. So it's just like, it's just cool.
A cool factor there.
He's just cool. Yeah.
But I mean, I do think Nick Nurse would be a great coach there, but it just kind of highlights my point of sometimes it's not about is he better. It's just it's new. It's a new, different voice, and it'll just come with some new ideas and everything else, and maybe inject some life into. Look, continuity is hard. They've had some good continuity since getting Drew Holiday. That's a team that has been like the core pieces have been in place, and the upside of that is chemistry, but the downside of that is staleness. And I do just think that that's probably where they're at. And any of those guys,
I do wonder how much Giannis is. I wonder how much Giannis has influence in this decision, because I've heard that he has a really great relationship with Charles Lee. Like that's his dude, and obviously Mike Budenholzer was not his dude. So if Giannis has any kind of influence, I wonder if he kind of angles for Charles Lee to get the job, or maybe he's impressed by Nick Nurse and whatever, and maybe he goes for that. But yeah, I think I do wonder how much of a factor that's going to be.
If I'm Milwaukee, I better be certain of my intel, or certain that, hey, he really likes Charles Lee, because to your point, Giannis is at the age where he can decide, do I want to stay or do I want to go? And if you hire a guy who's a brand new coach and it doesn't work out, I'm telling you, next season is important for the Bucks. And I'm not I hate to be the guy that starts to look at would he leave? Would he force his way out? Because it's my least favorite type of coverage. But in this moment, rather than talk about, should he or will any of that, at this moment, if you're the Bucks, you have to look around and say, hey, as long as we have Giannis, we are title contenders no matter who our coach is. Yeah. We can't lose him. And that structures the way you think about every decision.
Yeah, and you could say, well, he wanted him, so we hired him. We're trying to, but then he could turn around and be like, well, I'm not in charge. You should have known that he's not a good head coach. If Charles Lee is indeed not a good head coach, we have no idea. I'm with you, and that's why I said before, this is the most important decision they've had to make since they've hired Mike Budenholzer. Like everything matters, and the NBA can, like you just said, it could turn in a second, and stars are fickle, as we know, and there's no telling when they can ask out. Because the other thing with Milwaukee is, they don't have a lot of draft picks. There's no real way to fix this. You kind of have to get this right, because this is kind of the team. You're kind of like, you're not locked into it per se, but you kind of are a little bit. All right. Coming up, the team that should be the title favorite, I think, is hiding in plain sight. We'll tell you who it is next on Locked On NBA. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, everywhere you get podcasts. Thanks for watching and listening. Let's take a look at the games tonight, Friday night. First one, Sixers-Celtics. Series is tied 1-1 after Boston crushed the Sixers in Game 2. Adam, what do you think the Sixers have to do to bounce back?
Man, that's a really tough question. Well, first, you got to hope that this first game back for the newly named MVP, Joel Embiid, that was a warm-up game, a tune-up game, because he sure
a little bit of spite in there.
Hey man, come on, chill, Wes, chill down, chill over there. No, but I mean, in all sincerity, like, first of all, I'm always impressed with players when in the playoffs they play through pain, play through injury, or any of that stuff. And I don't think you can watch that game and watch Embiid move up and down the court and say, oh, that guy's 100%. He looks far. He honestly looks like a guy that maybe shouldn't be playing. And so I tip my hat to him. But the problem is, you need him to be dominant. You need him to be the guy that he was in the regular season, the MVP. And he just looks like he's incapable of being that. And if so, how quickly can you adjust your offense and your defense to say, all right, he is now a super role player. He is now a guy that we need Harden.
Adam, if that's the case, the series is over. Forget it. Just pack your bags. Like, why even play the games? Like,
hold on a second, Wes. What did we learn from Game 1 and really from Game 4 of the previous round? Is that James Harden really does have a little bit more in his bag than he let on. And I got to say, James Harden is the captain of the James Harden fan club, and I don't always love that about him. But when he went to the podium after Game 1 and said, listen, all year I've been sacrificing. I can be this guy still now, but I'm playing to, we have an MVP, so I'm letting him be the guy and I'll do this other stuff. Now, is he embellishing it after a great game? Maybe, but you know what? He went out and did that in game one to a very good Celtics team. And so part of me looks at it and says, you might be able to say, hey, I know we've done this all year with you as number one and me as number two, but if that's how you're moving, maybe we can say, hey, set some good screens. You're going to pick and pop a little bit more. We really need your defense, but I can't have you in the lane. We got to play a little bit more 4 or 5 out so that I can have some room to operate because I got to be the number one guy because I'm not hurt.
Did you see that he bought Joel Embiid a Rolex?
I did see that.
Was it? It was everywhere. I think I got it emailed to me. It was just like
yeah,
he made sure that you saw it. James, it came from a James Harden Gmail account. I'm with you. I think. Look, it's cool to see Harden kind of get back to that level. It's kind of a fun flashback and stuff like that. I just don't trust him to do it for 4 games.
Do you trust Embiid to do it though for 3 games?
I don't know. I'm with you. He didn't look right. Like the biggest difference to me was what was that 52-point game against the Celtics at the end of the regular season that basically won him the MVP. Sure. He was just like bowling over Grant Williams. Like Grant Williams was nothing. He was a mosquito in front of Joel Embiid. And that was the opposite of what I saw in game 2. Like Grant Williams was all over just defending Joel Embiid and just limiting it. And I was like, that's the difference to me. That's like a perfect corollary, perfect comparison. They need a better version of Joel Embiid, and I do question whether or not he's going to get there. I have no idea. Obviously, but
well, let's go with this though, real quick.
Sure.
Heat and Knicks are good. I think the 76ers can beat them with Embiid in the condition that he's in, because I think the 76ers are just better. And to my point, James Harden, to me, I feel pretty confident that he can do James Harden things against those teams as good as they are. So really, you're just talking about the Celtics before you get to the finals. I don't think it's that inconceivable to say, hey, man, you're not healthy. We just need you to be this other thing right now. And maybe better than it was in game 2. Maybe you're healthy in 2. Maybe you're healthy in 3 when the finals start. Yeah. But if we're trying to ride you in the post and roll you to the rim and run you up and down the court, I would be shocked if he bounced back in game 3.
Let's go to Suns Nuggets. Nuggets lead that series 2-0. The series is going to Phoenix Friday night. What did you like from those first 2 games that the Nuggets need to keep doing?
Everything. I liked everything from it. I mean, Denver's defense has been incredible. You know, the Suns are a little bit compromised. Even before the Chris Paul injury, one of the things that we learned, having not seen the Suns at full strength all year because KD basically missed the entire season, you get into a play, and then they play the Clippers team, and you think, okay, maybe they can still do this. The Nuggets have just ignored half of the players that get into the rotation. And by the way, the Phoenix Suns have tried Ish Wainwright, Jock Landale, Cam Payne, Landry Shamet. They've been throwing out. Damian Lee has played 26 minutes last game. They are reaching for guys that can be sort of the 5th guy in different configurations. And so far, Denver has said, we don't buy it. Let's see what you do. And they haven't been able to punish it. So part of me thinks that now with Chris Paul out, that now you got to find 2 guys on the court almost at all times to fill in for him.
Yeah, welcome to the campaign experience. Like this is, it's a roller coaster ride, man.
So it gets tough. But from Denver's side, you know, I have just loved the way that this team has defended, the way they've executed, and I have to give Michael Malone a lot of credit. They won game 1 of the first round by 27 points. They won game 1 of the second round, I think, by 23 points or 19 points, something like that. They have been prepared in every game, and especially coming into series. I think Michael Malone has come into a series very prepared and with the team fully prepared. And in game 1, Jamal Murray hit a 3-pointer to basically seal the game, and he turned the crowd and said, we're ready for this. That's exactly what the Nuggets look like through 7 now. Yes, 7 playoff games. They look like a team that has been waiting and is finally ready for this moment.
I have been so impressed with their defense. Defensive rating of 107.5. They're allowing 107.5 points per 100 possessions in the playoffs. That's awesome. That's awesome.
4th best in the playoffs right now.
And I know people will say, well, you know, the Chris Paul, he was limited and now he's out. And then like what you were just talking about, that's still a Suns team with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. And they did have Chris Paul for a little while. And DeAndre Ayton's not like a scrub, man. Like that guy puts up like 18 points a game. That's a hard team to, if you just blink, you know, Devin Booker's pulling up or Kevin Durant's pulling up, like that's a hard team to defend, even with the 5th starter issue that they have. And they've kind of made it look easy. You know, like I've just been so unbelievably impressed. Those moves to get KCP, Bruce Brown, everything they do has worked. The adjustments that they've made with Jokic, kind of showing different coverages with the drops and the hedging and all that kind of stuff. Like they've clicked on that end, and everything that they've done, and you know this as well as anybody, you've talked about it all the time. Everything they've done in this regular season has sort of led up to this moment, so to speak. Not necessarily specifically to play the Suns, but just in general in the playoffs. So,
well, there's something funny, Wes, because all year, people have looked at Denver as the one seed. I mean, they were in first place for half of a calendar year. They've since before December, they've been number one in the West. But it's funny because the West, there's been a lot of teams that have left wins on the table this year, and then Denver up there at the front. And I think people at the top of the standings, I think a lot of people said, yeah, they're a one seed, but all these other teams left wins on the table. I think you look at it and go, Denver left wins on the table very clearly too. They had nobody pushing them. They coasted through the finish line, but when you see them turn it up to the top level, they can defend. And so far through 7 games, nobody has stopped them. And you might say, well, who have they played? That Minnesota Timberwolves team has good defense. They are a good defensive team. Denver still bullied them and was able to score and be effective there. So I think Denver is firing at an all-time high right now. And when you look at their path now to the finals, you've got a Lakers-Warriors series that's tied 1-1. Old players went deep in round 1. They had to go 6 and 7 games respectively. They play every other night. I just look at it and I go, Denver's likely going to be resting between every single round to get to the finals, and that's a huge advantage.
I want to see what Phoenix looks like in Phoenix, but I don't want to overreact to these 2 games in Denver, but based on what I saw in those games and just in the playoffs in general, even outside that series, I think the Nuggets should be considered the clear-cut favorites to win the championship. FanDuel has them as a pretty distant second behind the Celtics. I think the Celtics are like plus 160 and the Nuggets were like plus 340, something like that. The Nuggets are outscoring their opponents by 10.3 points per game in the playoffs. Number 1 in the playoffs, without needless to say. They're awesome. I'm with you. To use your words before on the Lakers and the Warriors, both teams solvable. The Nuggets, meanwhile, the big question in the first round was, can they guard Karl-Anthony Towns? He's a hard, he's kind of those stretches Jokic out, all that stuff. They solved it. Problem solved. Boom. Rolled through. Phoenix, how are you going to guard Booker and Durant and all these things? So far through 2 games, solved it. Problem solved.
87 points they scored in game 2. I mean, that was a juggernaut defensive performance.
They just keep it's like, okay, well, what about this thing? Okay, they solve it. They conquer this thing and then they keep moving on. They have been easily the most impressive team in the playoffs. And like you said, they had the best record in the league for a very long time. They're the number 1 seed in the Western Conference. They basically coasted the last 2-3 weeks of the regular season because they were so far away the best team in the West. I feel like they were just hiding in plain sight this entire time. And maybe if Durant doesn't get traded to Phoenix, we're thinking about the Nuggets differently. But because it was so loud and it's the Suns and the new super team and Durant and all that, and people were like fairly saying, you know what, I think the Suns are the team to beat in the West. But the Nuggets just have it, man. And like I said, they're the most complete team. They have the most depth. They have the most versatility. They have the best player, or one of the best players in Jokic. Like they're the favorite to me. They're the team to beat to me.
The one thing
I'll say, seen so far,
their defense has been very impressive. They've played against 2 teams that offensively have been compromised. I mean, the Timberwolves play 2 bigs. They have some holes in their offensively. I think they're a very good defensive team, but offensively they have some holes. So Denver looks good defensively against them. Understandable. You go against the Suns team, and yes, the firepower at the top is unbelievable. Yes, the pick and roll game is supposed to be Nikola Jokic's kryptonite. That's the thing that's really going to give him a hard time. And so far that has not been the case. But as I mentioned, they do have one guy that you don't have to guard. And I am curious to see where it goes. If they make it through this, having a 2-0 lead, if they make it into the next round, Lakers, Warriors, are they going to be able to stretch Denver out in ways that they haven't been stretched out just yet? The JaMychal Green move is interesting because maybe that's a similar tactic that you might need against a Denver team. And then you get to the finals. Is it Boston or Philadelphia? Are one of those teams going to be able to stretch them out on that end to make them look like they did in the regular season, which is to say incompetent defensively? I think that's still TBD. But so far, Denver has passed every single test that has been thrown at them in the playoffs, and they've looked like the best version of themselves.
Yep. Like I said, just so far, they're the team. And you mentioned the Timberwolves were compromised. I wasn't really that impressed with any team in the first round. I actually had more. I think I told you, I got on here and we talked about the Sixers sweeping the Nets. I was like, the most unimpressive sweep I've ever seen. And then like a week later, you got Milwaukee losing to the 8th seed as the number 1 seed. I'm like, maybe we should have had a little bit more respect for the Sixers sweep over the Brooklyn Nets because at least they took care of business. But yeah, I just think based on the competition,
Yeah.
Right now, the Nuggets have been the best team in the playoffs.
By the way, Jokic has been the best player in both series so far. I mean, that's not too surprising in the Minnesota series, but now you're in a series with Kevin Durant and Devin Booker, and it's undeniable who the best player has been so far. Nikola Jokic right now through the playoffs, averaging 28 points per game. That is 8th best of the playoffs. He is 3rd best in rebounds per game, 4th best in assists per game. Oh, by the way, he's shooting nearly 50-50-75 splits, 50% from the field, 47.5% from 3 on good volume. He's actually taking some threes, and then 75% from the foul line. So efficiency still there, numbers up. I mean, he's playing fantastic.
He's pretty good. All right, we'll see what happens tonight. Game 3 is in Phoenix. Thanks for making Locked On NBA your first listen every day. Everydayers, make sure that you're subscribed to the show. We'll be back on Monday with the biggest stories from the NBA weekend. In the meantime, you can find me over at Locked On Heat, Adam over at Locked On Nuggets. Adam, have a great weekend.
You as well.